Morning, I'm Ben Fisk from Dynamite Baits, and we thought we'd come out today to do a Pellet Waggler video for you. It's a nice day in April, pretty cold overnight, so we're going to be up against it a bit today. We've come to the fantastic Sykehouse Fishery near Doncaster. It's a very, very deep venue, so it lends itself to these kind of tactics, because the deeper the venue is, the more inclined fish are going to come shallow. The fish are still going to be, out there in the middle of the lakes, but they're wanting some feed, they're wanting to come up near the surface a bit more. That's when your waggler's going to come into it, especially on these deeper, bigger lakes. So, I've got a few waggler rods set up today. As I say, I've just had probably about 10 casts now. I did lose one about third or fourth cast. I'm just at the minute looking really for the depth the fish are going to be at, because it's so deep here. There's a lot of water for fish to play with, a lot of water for them to come up and down in. So at the minute, early on in this session, it's very much a case of finding what depth the fish are going to be feeding at. This one has come about 6 or 7 foot, I think. I don't know exactly how deep this lake is, but they tell me here it's probably 15 foot out there at least, maybe more. This is Stock Lake. So we've just got to sort my clutch out a little bit. It's got a carp on at the minute, not a massive carp, but they really do scrap in here already, I'm finding. Nice common, there we go. So as I say, that's quite a deep rig. That's come about 7 foot probably, maybe more. And I actually took it on the drop, so it actually pulled my rod out of the hands almost when I was talking to Mark, the cameraman. But that's a nice start, nice carp. So what we're going to do today, just going to show you a few little rigs and tricks, baits, just a few little ways of doing things that are going to make you catch more on the Pellet Waggler. Right, there's a few different ways of fishing the Waggler, and it's important to get the right one for the day and the time of year. So today, it's cold. It was actually 3 degrees when we got here an hour or so ago. It's deep venue, it's been raining overnight, the fish are likely to be deeper, and it's early season. So with that in mind, we're going to fish I've got a rod here with quite a deep waggler setup, so probably 6 or 7 foot, and we're going to fish that with a bigger waggler because it's deeper, and we're going to be more inclined to leave that in the water, leave it for longer because it's deeper, there's more water for the bait to travel through, fish are going to be deeper, they're going to be a bit less active. So that's going to be fished, as I say, quite deep, and we're not going to cast as much necessarily. We're going to leave it out there, twitch the bait a bit, and that's, as I say, when fish are it's a bit colder, they're a bit more lethargic, and they're not going to be inclined to chase the bait as much, which I think is going to be the case today. The other way of fishing, I've got another setup here. This is actually a much smaller float. It's much shallower, it's probably 3 or 4 foot deep. And this is going to come into play as it gets warmer into May, June, July. The fish start coming up, cruising around near the surface. Then you're going to be fishing a lot shallower. You're going to be a lot more active, so you're going to be casting a lot. Bites might come within, 2, 3, up to 10 seconds of casting in as it falls through that first 3 or 4 foot. Then you're going to be bringing it in again and casting some more, because you're getting bites on the drop. Fish are coming right up, intercepting the pellets. You might be able to see them. And as I say, it's very, very active. You've got to have a high work rate for that, and you've got to keep that bait moving and keep casting. So a lot of work and a slightly lighter float, because you're fishing shallower. A big float will spook them. So as I say, a shorter, lighter float. Right, I'm just going to show you quickly the types of floats I use. So these are clear wagglers, the loaded wagglers. So they've got wire or lead at the bottom of the floats, and what that means is that you can lock them on the line with float stops, so you have no big shot on the line that's going to damage the light lines we talked about. And the generally just loaded floats tend to fly and cast just a lot more straighter and a lot further than unloaded versions where you've got big bulky SSGs and stuff like that either side of them. So as I say, loaded floats, very much the way to go. Crystal clear as well, so which is important these days a lot of the time when you're fishing near the surface and the top few feet. So I've got these slightly thicker matrix ones, which are a big kind of thick tip there, about 10mm tip. Therefore, kind of if it's calmer, bigger pellets, fishing shallow and things like that, where when it's calm and there's not too much chop on, and you can get away with a big bulbous float like that, big bulbous tip. These are slightly finer. These are handmade by a mate of mine, Keith Easton. You can get them on Facebook, I think, from him, if you ask him nicely. Very, very good float. These are a bit thinner, if you notice, a bit longer, so they're going to be a bit more sensitive. You can fish them a bit deeper. He does do a thicker version as well. But as I say, that's going to be main choice today, this kind of longer one. I've got two, they've got that wire wrapped at the bottom, as I say. And I've got two of these set up today. I've got a 3 gram, which I'm going to fish about 4 foot deep. Again, if the wind gets up, I can change that to 4 gram maybe. And I've got a bigger float, 6 gram, which I'm going to fish 6 or 7 foot deep. Again, if the wind gets up or if it gets calmer, you can swap that up to 7 or 8 grams. You can bring it down to 5 grams. You just got to mess about a lot of the time, find out what the fish want. Now, the setup of these is very, very simple. And I've got this on, well, it's on a little gap between 2 bits of 2 float stops. So I've got one above and 2 below for extra security. You'll also notice there's that little gap there, and that's really important because if you fish with your waggler kind of tight against them stops or tight against 2 shot, it doesn't fold. When you strike or when you cast, the waggler doesn't fold properly against the line because it's locked in place. Whereas if you keep that little bit of a gap, when there's movement from that and it hits them stops, it folds completely parallel with the line like that, so there's less resistance. It's just generally better. And also there's just a little tiny little a good little tip here of something I've just made as a little connection, so you can just quickly change your waggler. I've basically got a tiny little swivel, and on that I've attached it's actually like a maggot clip which carp anglers use. It's only like a small thing, but it acts like a snap swivel almost, but it's a lot kind of wider. It's a kind of more rectangular, circular shape, so the waggler can move a bit in there, and that just makes it so much easier. You can switch your floats about in an instant, like you can with a snap swivel, but because it's just wider, it's easier to do, and the float sits a bit more natural. So that's the setup. As I say, really light mainline, 0.16. You don't really want to go much, you know, you can't risk going any finer than that for carp, I'd say, otherwise you're asking for trouble. That's down to an 0.18 hook length, and I've got a 16 carp bander hook with a bait band on. I'm using quite a small micro band, but it's quite thick, so because it's so small it grips the pellet a lot, and also it grips the pellet better than kind of a bigger band. And also because it's a thick micro band, again it grips the pellet, so you don't want to be rebaiting loads because you're making quite a lot of casts, especially if you're fishing really shallow. You don't really want to be rebaiting loads, so again that thick band just helps it stay on for longer. Right, bait choice. Now for me there's only really one choice, and that's pellets, for the feed anyway. So we've got 2 sizes here. We've got 6mm and 8mm dynamite low oil feed pellets. Very, very good pellet. Quite heavy, quite dark, fire out very easily. So which size do you use? Well, it depends really, not only on the size of fish, but also how far you're fishing. So like today, we've got the wind off our back. We can easily get 6mm out into the middle of the lake where we need to be. So I've started today's session on 6mm. You know, 4 or 5 at a time, just going from there really, starting and easing the way into the session. I've caught some skimmers and things on 6mm, which has then led me to step up to 8mm, and that's caught me some carp. So it's all about really reacting. On another day, you might get away with 6mm. 6mm might be better than 8mm. You know, if you're fishing for smaller carp or F1s, for example, or in a shallower lake up to islands, for example, 6mm is probably better. These big lakes, big carp, deep lakes, 8mm. There's also the option as well, an 11mm pellet. To be honest, I'd only use them really when it's a really big venue, really big fish. Perhaps if the wind's a bit awkward, you can't quite get 8mm where you need to be, then you can step up. Just a few things that we do to these pellets is, first of all, got 2 things to put on them. Now, if it's small fish, F1s, go for the old faithful F1 soak. Today it's proper carp, big carp, and I love a kind of oil on my pellets. Not only to, it basically makes them sink first and foremost. If there's an odd floater, it gives them a bit of weight so you can get them out easily. But it also, this tiger nut oil, which is a kind of specimen carp mix, kind of gives them a lovely kind of tigery, sweet coating, really oily coating. Not only does it smell great for the fish, it also does this. I don't know if the camera can pick this up, but when you fire them out, and you can see it's a bit choppy out there, the oils come off them as they're sinking, and they actually create like a little slick and a calm area, which just screams, you know, screams attractiveness and food to fish. They'll come into that little calm area. So that's just an extra little boost you can give your pellets with that oil or with that soak. Right, just want to talk very quickly about hook baits here. My starting hook bait is nearly always a pellet, an 8mm pellet. What I'm feeding sinks with the bait as it goes in. However, I've also got on standby some of our new washters. And although these were designed primarily as a feeder hook bait, they do have a big use for the waggler as well, because if you balance them right, they sink so slowly through the water. So when you're fishing, say 3-4 foot deep or above, or even if you're mugging fish, these are brilliant because, as I say, they sink slowly. They give fish loads of time to see them and pick them out. Now we have got 3 versions of the wafters. We've got obviously the coloured ones, the pink and yellow. Those, to be honest, I prefer those more for feeder fishing, when fish are looking on the bottom, milling around, and they pick something bright out. However, up in the water, I'm going to go for the brown ESZ versions. They're more natural, they look like the pellets, and they match the hatch. So basically, it's a quick one on the washters here. First of all, we do get a lot of questions at Dynamite as to what you actually do with this liquid. It's very, very simple really. Don't put it all in at once. You don't need to, because it's quite a strong liquid. All you need to do when you get your tub, just apply, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, around about that, 5 or 6 squirts, because it's quite strong stuff. Give the whole thing a quick shake, and you're done with them. Now with the washters, I've got a separate hook length, set up for them. It uses a little bayonet, which is a little section of an eyed hook. So the shank of an eyed hook I've cut off with wire cutters, and I'm going to use that basically. Just going to take a washter, and it's just like a little spike basically. You spike that through the middle of the washter, and it's hooked neatly below, so it sinks very naturally as it is, sort of straight on like that. Just always, when you do use washters, have a tub of water on your side tray, just to make sure that you're using a big enough hook to sink them. So that's sinking lovely there. That's a 7mm washter with a 16 hook and a bayonet, so there's a bit of weight from the bayonet as well. But just be careful, as I say, if you use too small a hook, they might float. Right, just going to demonstrate the process of casting and presenting the waggler and feeding. You've got 2 options here. You can feed before you cast a waggler, or you can feed after. Now personally, a lot of the time I prefer to feed afterwards, because 1, it gives you more time in the water, and 2, you can pull your waggler back into those pellets. I think feeding before you cast is very good when the fish are very shallow and you're expecting a bite instantly in the first 2 or 3 foot, so you can be fully concentrating on the float, ready to strike. But when the fish are deeper, I think you want to do something along the lines of this. So as I say, we've got basically, I think when you're doing a lot of casting, like when it's really shallow fishing, then it's an advantage to use an 11-foot rod and a 3000 reel, simply because it's lighter and it's easier to fish with. For long casts and things, you can step up to a 4000 reel as well with the same main line. So just going to fire this out now. Now one thing I will say is, it's important to really fire your waggler out and cast it hard so your line's straight. You know, don't lob it like you would a feeder. Fire it out so you get the line straight. And what I've done there, I've overcast where I'm fishing, and I've taken a couple of winds underwater and sunk the line, and then I've fed my pellets and brought it back into them. So my line is sunk and it's presenting the waggler well. Then, if you don't get a bite then, there's a number of things you can do. Give it a quick twitch, just get the bait up like you would when you're fishing shallow, get a few more pellets over the top. So I'm not going mad with the pellets today. I'm feeding, 2, 3 at a time because it's still early season. I don't want to be firing loads in. And if it's really fishing well and there's a lot of competition, then maybe you can really bladder pellets and you can draw a few in. Again, nothing's happened. Quick twitch, bringing the waggler back, feed a few more pellets. And something that's really important as well is to have this front rest. So I've just got a flat rest here at the front. That's just allowing me to put the rod on it while I feed and keep my line. Oh, there we go. See, now that had been in quite a while. I'd left that, I'd fed 3 times there. And because it's, I wouldn't normally leave that in if it was warmer. I wouldn't have left it in that long. If I was getting bites on the drop, I'd have had, 2 casts in that time. But because the fish are deeper, they're not chasing the bait as much. That's why they're sitting lower, and I was inclined to sit there with the rod on the rest. Now, just another really good quick tip. If you were pole fishing, and I always think when I'm fishing rods, how would I do the same when I'm pole fishing? Because pole fishing is the ultimate way of fishing because of the presentation. Now, I'd feed. If I hooked a fish on the pole shallow, I'd feed. So what am I going to do on the waggler? I'm going to feed while I'm playing it. Now, the best way to do this is, I find, is to obviously have your drag set and also keep a bend in your rod while you're doing this. So if it does set off, it's not going to break you. There's a bit of cushion. So I've put 3 pellets out there again, and I'm going to focus on the fish. If it's a big fish and it takes a long time, then I might consider, feeding 2 or 3 times. But this is only a 3 or 4 pound fish, so I'm only going to feed the once. There you go. Give me a good soaking. Nice little mirror. Typical pellet waggler fish, really. Well hooked on an 8mm pellet. And there you go. It's a bit lively, this one, so I don't think I'm going to hold him up for very long. There you go, nice scales on him. And that's basically, very quickly, that was the process to go through: the casting, the feeding, the sinking the line. You don't always have to sink the line. If you're fishing really shallow and you're expecting a bite as soon as it hits, you don't need to sink the line. But as it is today, with the chop on and the deeper kind of presentation rig, we're sinking the line. So that's what we do with presentation. Right, just going to sign off now. We've had a great day here today at Sykehouse, despite how cold it's been this morning. Great day on the pellet waggler out there in the middle of the lake. It's been quite interesting because I've had next to no bites on the drop, so nothing as it's fallen. Everything has been as the bait's been settled, 30 seconds, a minute and a half. So it's paid to be patient, using those light lines and that careful feeding. Probably fed probably 4 or 5 pellets at a time, and skimmers came in a bit. Best depth has been about 7 foot, so they've been quite deep down. Just going to show you now just one of our keep nets, what we've caught. The fish here do scrap quite a bit. Here we go. Put them all back. Some nice mirrors. A few lean commons. A nice scaly one there to finish. So, thank you very, very much for watching the video today. Hope you've got lots out of it, and we'll hopefully see you next time on the bank or on the Dynamite Baits YouTube channel.